We saw a lot of ways of querying here, but now I briefly also want to talk about performance, because performance always matters. When you run queries, you learned that certain operations instantly hit the database whilst others don't. For example, if I create a book and I set a title and so on, then this does not instantly hit the database. That only happens once I call save. Now for queries, it's actually kind of similar. If I add a bestsellers variable, and in there I want to store the result of book, objects filter is best selling true. If I hit enter, you might think that the database is hit by Django and that query is executed, but it actually isn't. Instead, the only thing Django or Python stores in bestsellers up to this point is this query definition, you could say, this query set, but not the result of that query. So the database actually wasn't touched yet. And that matters because you can actually also chain filter calls. So for example, here I'm storing the bestsellers query set, not the result, just the query definition. But maybe I'm also then interested in the amazing bestsellers. And that could be the bestsellers, which I then filter even more to search for a rating greater than 4. So only books with a rating of 5 would match that. That's something we can do because calling filter returns a query set, which itself is an object on which we can again call filter to narrow it down even more. And you can do that how often you want. So now I have two query sets, bestsellers and amazing bestsellers, but nonetheless, the database wasn't touched yet, which is good for performance, of course. Django will only reach out to the database and do something with it once you do something with your query sets. So for example, if I print bestsellers, now once I hit enter, Django will go to the database and run the query, because now we really need the data. And the same if I run amazing bestsellers. Though there, for amazing bestsellers, Django is even able to do this in a very elegant way. It notices that amazing bestsellers is based on bestsellers, and it actually caches the results of your query sets, so of running your queries. So when we ran this query, which actually happened when we printed bestsellers, Django did not just reach out to the database and get the data, but it also cached the results. So that, for example, if I run print bestsellers again, it does not go to the database again, but it reuses those cached results. And it does cache them until you change something in the database, for example. But that caching even helps us with amazing bestsellers, because there Django sees that this is based on some cached query set, where we already got the results from before, and hence it will just have a look at that cache result and narrow that down even more. So all these lines up to here, all these lines of code, actually only resulted in one database hit. Not 4, not 2, not 3, but 1. And that happened here. And thereafter, we worked with the cached result. And that, of course, is a very nice feature, and it also has an implication for you as a developer. If you find yourself writing some code where you need the results from different query sets, you might want to structure your code such that you allow Django to reuse cached results. For example, code where this would not be possible would be this code. If I run print book objects filter rating greater than 3, let's say. If I run this and I run it again, then we have 2 database hits. Because this is not stored in some variable, hence Django also doesn't cache it. Instead, it re-executes that query against the database every time we run this line. If we, on the other hand, do store that in a variable, so if we do store book objects filter rating greater than 3 in there, then if we print good books twice, the database was only hit once. Because we have this variable which stores the query set, and hence we're using one and the same query set for both prints. Whereas up there, we created two query sets, which had the same content, but that's a check Django doesn't perform. Instead, it just sees two query sets with no relation, hence it runs two operations against the database. Now, that's a little bit more advanced. I still wanted to put it out there because these are things you also should be aware of when working with Django. Because of course you want to write code that is not just easy to read and fulfills its purpose, but that also delivers a good performance. And that is one important aspect you therefore should be aware of when you're working with data and a database.